That took me like 7 years to pull off. When Metroid Dread was announced back at E3, it kinda felt like the beginning of Nintendo's rebound arc. Nintendo will forever be nothing more than just another company in my eyes, but at least they make good games, you know, except when they don't. The Nintendo cycle is to set the world on fire 1 minute and then give you a cardboard box the next. It's a cycle of dormancy and then comeback. With Dread and numerous other things on the horizon, it was looking like Nintendo was preparing for its comeback. Now, for me, there are very few games that justify the $60 price tag that they have at launch, and that tends to outweigh my fear of missing out. Although FOMO has often been exploited in the gaming industry, it tends to be something that I'm kind of immune to. But there are times when a game just grabs me and I have to get it as soon as possible, $60 notwithstanding. These are games that I had faith in before they even came out. Metal Gear Solid 5, Doom Eternal, Cyber Bitch 2077, Origami King, and now Metroid Dread. This is the extremely small minority of games that I bought either on launch or very soon after because they seemed truly promising to me. Now, some of these games were worth it, some were good but maybe not fully worth it, and some were Cyberpunk 2077. But where does Metroid Dread fit in the equation? Yeah, it's pretty good. I would put it right on the border town between Doom Eternal Zone and Origami King Zone. Metroid Dread is a 2D Metroidvania that costs $60 and can apparently be beaten in 8 hours. Now, when you put it like that, it doesn't sound very impressive, but what makes Metroid Dread unique to a lot of games that come out today is that it's a very old school kind of game, which is to say that it's 95% actual gameplay. There are some occasional QTE sequences, but the vast majority of the game is entirely player directed. This game is basically all gameplay, and it's fucking good gameplay too. As to the length of the game, Time to Beat claims that it takes 8 hours to beat this game and 11 hours for a 100% run. Now, I don't know how you fucking kids managed to 100% this game in only 11 hours, but you gotta show me what I'm doing wrong because I was not nearly that fast, okay? I took like 19 hours. Okay, how about this? How about a trade-off? I once beat Donkey Kong 64 to 101% in only 18 hours, so if you just show me how to speedrun this game, I will give you the keys to annihilate Donkey Kong. But in any case, I barely noticed the runtime at all because the game is just so captivating that I was just glued to the screen, dying, often literally, to see what was around the corner. I haven't played a game this addicting and enthralling since Breath of the Wild. The $60 price tag has come under a lot of scrutiny, and to be honest, I often find it funny that all games cost $60 in the first place, and I wasn't particularly happy to be paying that much money for it, but at the same time, I'm a little perplexed as to why everyone suddenly chose this game of all games to complain about the $60 price tag. I've seen plenty of dog shit $60 games over the years and nobody minded. Why is it okay to charge $60 annually for FIFA and Madden or Cyberpunk 2077, a game that isn't even finished, but charging $60 for Metroid is just out of the question? Because it's 2D. Unfortunately, some people have this idea that even the most broken, unpolished 3D game is more important than the most highly fine-tuned 2D games, and to be honest, that really bums me out. Again, $60 for any game or anything when you're an adult with expenses and bills and shit will always be a pain in the ass, but I don't think Metroid Dread, or any 2D game for that matter, should be used as an example of that purely on the grounds that it's 2D. With respect to the length, the runtime of a game means absolutely nothing to me if I have no idea what the quality of that time will actually be. You can make a game 60 plus hours long, but if most of that is just shallow gameplay and fluff, that's not going to save you in my book. When judging on a purely dollar to hour ratio, people often forget to consider replayability. Star Fox 64 is one of the most polished and addicting games I have ever played. You can blow through it in an hour, but because it's so highly fine-tuned, I'd probably fire it up and beat it again immediately. Do you guys remember Pikmin? One of the greatest games Nintendo ever made? That was $60 when it first came out, and you can beat it in like 3.5 to 4 hours, but every time I play through it, I notice something new and I come up with new optimal strategies strategies. I played this game so many times since it came out 20 years ago. So short runtime, but the cumulative time I spent with it over 2 decades made up for it easily. Then you have The Witcher 3. I got this on a Steam sale and it only cost me $35 and took me 60 hours to beat. Now that might sound like a really good deal, except that for me, this game was boring as hell. So much so that by the 45-hour mark, I had to start getting drunk while playing the game so I could actually enjoy it. And by the time I was drunk enough to beat it and reach the credits, I already spent more on beer alone than I would have spent on the game if I bought it at launch without the Steam sale. So I ended up $100 in the hole over this one boring ass game that I barely even remember anything from, even the parts where I was sober. And on top of all that, I had a wicked hangover. Let's just say that in all my time playing Metroid Dread, I never thought about alcohol once. This game cured my alcoholism. I walked into my AA meeting and I slapped this game down on the table and told them all, yeah, just play this. Then it became an AAA meeting. Because AAA games. On the other hand, you can't be drunk while playing this game. Again, with Bitcher, it really speaks to how shallow and easy that game is that even on the second hardest difficulty, I was able to beat it while drunk. This is not the case with Metroid, because it requires your full attention and reflexes in order to survive and find all the stuff. The gameplay loop of Metroid is running deeper into the caves until you hit a point you cannot get past, so you backtrack, paying very close attention to the environment until you stumble upon a place you've never seen before and you think, hopefully there's a cool upgrade in here. And it turns out, yes, there is. But you have to kill this big motherfucker first. Have fun, dickhead. And then after being a dumbass trying to figure out how to get past this move, you suddenly remember that you have this really cool slide maneuver that lets you go under his feet and rock his shit up. I'm gonna talk about the movement in a minute, don't you worry. Then you get the upgrade and now a bunch of doors you couldn't get past 5 minutes ago are now entirely accessible and you waltz right through until you hit an entirely new kind of door that you can't open. Now this gameplay loop might sound a little monotonous and frustrating, but it actually works really well in Metroid Dread because everything in between all that is so fun. Just the act of running and gunning feels godlike. For a lot of us, our default response to getting stuck might be underwhelming disappointment, but if you've played Metroid games before, you'll know that this is an incredibly regressive and counterproductive mindset, and you gotta start kicking that shit to the curb. If there's one thing I've learned about myself and some other gamers, it's that a lot of us can be very resistant to games that force us to re-examine our mindset, as though the game is telling us no, like we're playing it wrong. But the reality is that if you get sad and weepy over every single obstacle in this game, you're never gonna get anywhere. It's just like real life. You need to view obstacles as opportunities. You gotta be thinking, okay, well this means I'm probably gonna learn a really cool move sometime later. I can't wait for that shit. And then guess what? Wide beam. Hey, I fucking love the wide beam. Oh my god, I love this thing. The Metroid games have always been about being a human punching bag. You get dropped in and all you have is this shitty little blaster thing and your instincts. Thankfully, you got this badass counter move where you press X right when they attack you and it automatically locks onto the enemy and you blow the fuck out of them. It's all about fighting your way through the hostile life forms to transform yourself from the punching bag into the dude who punches the bag. That phenomenal sense of achievement when you build yourself up to being this broken ass character after running around like a little bitch for 3 hours. You used to be nothing more than fresh meat, and by the end of the game, look at you now, you're running the joint. Usually when you get stuck in these games, it's purely because you haven't looked hard enough. This can be a very difficult truth to accept, but more often than not, it is the truth nonetheless. Now, maybe this was a tiny bit less true of the older games where things were so cryptic and out of the way that the odds of you figuring things out on your own were astronomical without Nintendo power. But Metroid Dread always gives you just barely enough information to figure everything out on your own. And that's the sick truth of this game. It's a labyrinthine maze of death, much like the rest of the games, but it's simultaneously potentially the most accessible game in the series. Whenever I was stuck, all I needed to do was take a good long look at the map or the environment, look for a path that probably goes somewhere, look for an obstacle that I now have the solution to. You have to be taking mental notes all the time and remembering, okay, so they put these weirdo blocks here that I have no solution for, so in 7 years when I find the super bomb, I'ma come back here and get whatever measly missile upgrade is here. That's one of the few complaints that I have. Most of the secrets in this game are missile or health upgrades, but by the time you've found 60% of the missile upgrades, you'll probably never actually run out because you just have way more than the game requires of you. But then again, the final boss is a little bit of a bastard, so you might want to get everything you can, you know, like, just in case. The more time I spend talking about video games, the more I realize just how important movement is to my enjoyment of the game. Mario 64, Star Fox 64, Doom Eternal, these are some of the best games I have played in my life, and they're all games defined by extremely tight, polished, and agile movement. Not every game can have controls that are this good, but you know which game does? Metroid Dread. The controls are fucking beautiful. I have no complaints about this at all. Samus is always running at full speed, wall jumping is snappy and instantaneous, you got this slide move, I love the slide move so much. The blaster can fire as quickly as you can mash the button, you got this aiming mode that lets you precisely stop and point at something instead of trying to do this awkward ass diagonal running and shooting crap. This little dash move that lets you evade attacks, it all just falls into place, and like that son of a bitch Todd Howard says, all of this just works. And it works so well that half the time I forget I'm using a stupid ass Joy-Con. The difficulty in Metroid Dread is as close to perfect as any game can get. The first thing I noticed is that it doesn't waste your time. There's none of that bullshit where you have to spend 7 years grinding all your health back when you die. When you enter boss fights or enemy zones, it gives you an automatic checkpoint right before so you don't have to walk all the way back from the last save point if you lose, which you almost definitely will, a lot. It's a tough game to be sure, but I mean, earlier this year I beat the original Metroid on NES on an actual console without save states, so I guess you could say I have some experience. You have the Emmy bots, or as I like to call them, a certain word that starts with a C that YouTube doesn't let me say anymore. Not only are these things invincible to regular attacks, not only are they faster than you and can kill you on contact and have an attack that's almost impossible to counter, but they're just smarter than you as well. I remember I destroyed this dude's face armor by baiting him onto the other side of this long ass room, and then when it came time to shoot the charge beam at his exposed head, I tried baiting him again, except this time he refused to go the same route because he caught on to my bullshit. You got bosses that are just absolutely vicious, and then once you get done fighting one crazy enemy with super sword attacks, an hour later the game makes you fight 2 of them at once. It's like how in Doom Eternal you have this Doom Hunter guy, and then after dying infinity times you jump down a hole and then it immediately makes you fight 2 of them at the same time. A less polished game could never get away with this as easily, but again, like Doom Eternal, Metroid Dread is incredibly polished and the game gives you all the tools to succeed. It doesn't just force you to move, it forces you to think as well, all the way up until you beat the game, and then that's when... What the fuck? More and more, gamers are looking for excuses to blame the game for their own shortcomings as a player.
Oh, nothing! I told you! It doesn't fucking work. I press left and up and neither works consistently, so I don't know what to do.
I've definitely done this before, but what separates good games from bad games is with a bad game, those excuses might actually be somewhat legitimate and understandable. The key to good game design is to give the player the tools to succeed and teach them how to use them while still making the game hard, except since they have all the tools and the hints, there aren't any excuses anymore and it's up to the player to get good. And I am happy to say that this is true of Metroid Dread. 99% of the time. Now, when I said that this game has beautiful controls and mechanics and that I have no complaints about it and that it all just works, I was referring to every part of Metroid Dread that doesn't involve the speed booster and the shine spark mechanic. Unless you're going for 100% like I did, you very well may never know the struggle with these moves, but if you have, hopefully you'll sympathize with me a little. On the surface, speed boost and shine spark are really cool moves, but some of the puzzles require you to utilize them in such an extremely strict and sensitive and precise way that if you fuck up even slightly, you gotta start again. The inputs are ridiculously sensitive. In order to charge the shine spark, you need to press the stick down after activating a full sprint, but if you do it slightly wrong, it cancels the sprint. Sometimes just activating the shine spark is a nightmare because the only sufficiently long stretch of land within reach is just barely long enough, so you have to press down a split second after it activates or you'll fall off and have to start again. Then if you do get the Shine Spark, it only stays charged for like 5-ish seconds, so you gotta run like a maniac to get into position, at which point you need to quickly release all other buttons and then tap B at the right moment, and then aim in a direction with the stick, which is a really fucking hard thing to do when you just got done running like hell into position and are probably shaking from disbelief that you actually managed to make it this far. Some puzzles even require you to use some metagame shit like recharging the Shine Spark out of a Shine Spark, which I didn't even know you could do at first. Maybe it tells you can do that. If it did, I don't remember that, so that's on me if it did. Then you gotta carry the recharged Shine Spark down here, recharge it again, then blast through these blocks. This made me so angry. I hadn't been this pissed off at a video game in a very long time. But what's crazy about Metroid Dread is that after you push through these disparate, shitty little parts, the game manages to start being insanely good again. No video game is without a couple of shitty parts, but the best ones are the ones that can actually recover from it and possibly even make you forget they happened. The presentation of Metroid is phenomenal. Doesn't have any of that 4K ray-traced Ellie shirt physics, but it's incredibly atmospheric. Have you ever walked into a cold place or a hot place in a video game and it actually felt like you could feel the temperature change in real life? Well, probably not, because that's kind of impossible. But if it was possible, this game would definitely do it. The only thing that's a little disappointing in Metroid Dread is the music. It's fine, but compared to its predecessors, where just about every other song in the game was an extremely memorable banger, the music in Dread is not quite as consistent, but at least it's still very atmospheric. Then you have the story. Dread has a few expositional dumps here and there. There are some insane lore developments and a ton of new information, which will be crazy for those invested in the Metroid canon, but it also relies a lot on the show don't tell approach, where you reconcile specific plot details that have been explained to you with the visual details hidden in the background. Samus herself is incredibly expressive through body language while having 3 lines of dialogue, and by the end of the game I was like, alright, I gotta know everything about Metroid now. This was when I officially became a Metroid fan. I was already kind of a fan, having beaten the original game last February, but now I wanted to see everything. Metroid Dread is probably the most refreshing game I played in a long time. It's a 2D game that kept me on my toes and kept me duct taped to the screen longer than 90% of big budget open world 3D games in the last few years could ever hope to do. It's incredibly polished, it's fun as hell, and it's tough, but incredibly fair, 99% of the time. Is it worth $60? That's gotta be up to you to decide. But the other brilliant thing about this game is how replayable it is. Already, people are doing subsequent playthroughs, figuring out optimal routes and strategies. Like, this game was basically made for replayability, so that's an important thing to factor in. I can definitely see myself playing through this game again. Maybe if I ever become truly insane, I'll try the hard difficulty. But after all is said and done, this is a brilliant game, and I'm immediately sold on the entire Metroid series now. And if you buy Far Cry 6 for $70 instead of this, I might actually hit you. Thanks for watching.